God. I just want a dad for mommy. She's really tired. The whispered plea cut through the soft harmony of the choir and flickering candlelight, silencing the Christmas Eve service for one man. In the back pew, Owen Blake opened his eyes slowly, searching for the source of the voice. Near the front, a little girl knelt. She couldn't have been more than 4. Her tangled blonde hair catching the candlelight like a halo. Her small hands clasped tightly together. Her red dress was a size too big, its hem frayed and worn. One of her boots looked older than the other, scuffed at the toe. But her face was profoundly serious, her voice steady as she prayed. Please, God. She whispered again, her voice a fragile thread of sound in the vast, quiet church. Just a dad. Not for me. For mommy. She cries when she thinks I'm asleep. Beside her sat a woman, her head bowed and shoulders sagging with a weariness that seemed to seep into the very wood of the pew. Her long, honey blonde hair was tied back hastily in a simple knot. She couldn't have been much older than 30. And her expression, though exhausted, was tender as she placed a gentle hand on the little girl's back. Owen's chest tightened. He didn't know them. But something stirred deep within him, a feeling long buried beneath layers of grief and success. He had come to this little church, a world away from his fast-paced Manhattan life, trying to find a sliver of peace after losing his mother just 2 months earlier. This had been her favorite service. She'd always said that Christmas miracles came quietly, not with a loud announcement. And now, here he was, witnessing a child pray not for toys or gifts, but for someone to take care of her mother. As the service ended, Owen watched the woman gather a worn coat and an old handbag. The little girl, holding a crumpled drawing, slipped her small hand into her mother's. They left silently, before the final hymn even began. Without thinking, Owen stood. He stepped into the aisle, his eyes following them as they walked out into the snowy night. Flakes swirled gently around them in the glow of the streetlights. The girl giggled, sticking out her tongue to catch one. Her mother offered a faint smile, a fragile expression, almost as if she had forgotten how. Hand in hand, they disappeared down the sidewalk, swallowed by the falling snow. Owen didn't follow. He wasn't sure why he had even stood. But the little girl's voice lingered, so small yet so sincere. It echoed deeper than any sermon ever had. He remained inside until the last candle was snuffed out. The choir's final notes faded, replaced by the cheerful chatter of families filing out, their arms full of gifts and their cheeks pink from the cold. Owen stayed in the shadows, a solitary figure in the emptying hall. Eventually, the pastor approached him. "Are you all right, son?" Owen nodded slowly. "Do you know the woman with the little girl?" he asked, his voice low. The pastor thought for a moment. "Ah. Yes. She comes now and then. Quiet woman. Never asks for anything. I believe her name is Grace. The little one is Ellie." "Grace," Owen repeated. The name fit her perfectly. "A lovely woman," the pastor added with a sad smile. "Life hasn't been kind to her. But she's doing her best." Owen gave a quiet thank you and stepped outside. The snow had thickened, blanketing the street in a pristine layer of white. He stood beneath a street lamp, its glow casting a soft halo around him. Somewhere ahead, Grace and Ellie were gone. He didn't know them. But something about that moment, that tiny, powerful prayer, clung to him. As the snowflakes melted on his face, Owen pulled his coat tighter and looked skyward. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, Owen could not shake the image of the little girl and her mother from his mind. He had returned to his luxury condo in Manhattan. But the sprawling space felt colder and emptier than ever before. The memory of that soft voice, "God, I just want a dad for mommy," lingered like a melody he couldn't forget. By midday, he had a last name, Grace Miller. The pastor had mentioned it gently, almost protectively. Owen discreetly reached out to an old college friend who now ran a local outreach program. He didn't ask for anything invasive. Just enough to know if they were safe. If the child had food and shelter. What he learned both humbled and unsettled him. Grace lived in a rundown apartment complex in an old part of town. A building decades past its prime, with faded paint, broken mailboxes, and rusted fire escapes. She was raising Ellie alone. Her husband had died 3 years ago in a car crash on his way home from a second job. Since then, she had been surviving, not living, not thriving, just surviving. She held down whatever work she could find. On some days, she scrubbed floors at a shopping center. On others, she washed dishes in a small diner or handed out flyers on street corners. Her meager income barely covered rent and groceries. And yet, she never asked for help. Not from the church. Not from her neighbors. She kept her head down, worked hard, and gave Ellie every last ounce of love she had left. Owen stared out the window of his high-rise office, the phone still in his hand. He couldn't stop picturing her. The way she had gently rested her hand on Ellie's back in the church pew. The profound weariness in her eyes even when she smiled. He made a call. That same afternoon, a contractor arrived at the apartment building under the pretense of inspecting roof damage for the landlord. By nightfall, 2 broken shingles had been replaced and the worst of the leak above her unit was sealed. A few days later, bags of groceries appeared at their door, anonymous deliveries filled with fresh fruit, milk, bread, and a warm, woolen blanket. Owen never signed a card. But on the morning of New Year's Eve, he couldn't help himself. He rose early, drove through the freshly fallen snow, and parked on the quiet street in front of their building as the city slowly woke. He stepped out with a small bouquet of winter daisies wrapped in brown paper and a bottle of fresh milk. He placed them gently on the doormat of apartment 2B. Then tucked a small, handwritten card beside them. "Someone up there cares for you." That was all. He didn't knock. He didn't linger. But Ellie did. 10 minutes later, as Grace opened the door to retrieve the morning paper, she saw the items. She blinked, startled. Ellie came running. "Mommy, look. Flowers and milk." Grace picked up the card and read it. Her brow furrowed in confusion. Who would leave this? Ellie clapped her hands. "I told you. Mommy. I think God sent an angel. Maybe it's the one I prayed to at church." Grace managed a small smile, though her eyes were filled with questions. She looked out into the empty, Still hallway, where the morning light was just beginning to peek through the dirty windows. She said nothing more. But that day, her steps felt a little lighter. She put the daisies in a chipped mug and placed them on the windowsill. Ellie insisted on drinking the milk slowly, savoring it like a special treat. From across the street, hidden behind the tinted windows of his car, Owen watched it all. He saw the way Ellie danced with joy, how Grace tilted her head while reading the note again and again. And something inside him settled. He had spent years building things, properties, portfolios, a public image, but this was different. This was real. This was something his mother would have smiled at. The next morning, he returned to the same spot, the same doormat. This time with a small box of cookies and a note tucked inside for the little one who believed. He never intended to be seen. But as Grace held the box in her hands, Ellie said it again, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, I think God really did send us an angel." And this time, Grace didn't have an answer. She just held the cookies close and whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe he did." The wind was bitter that morning as Owen stepped out of a cafe with his coffee. He had no logical reason to be on this side of town. Yet he kept returning, pulled by a quiet curiosity he couldn't quite name. Near the corner market, he saw her again. Grace, bundled in her worn coat, was carrying a small grocery bag when an elderly man slipped on a patch of ice. Without hesitation, she dropped her things and rushed to him. "Easy now," she said gently, helping him to a nearby bench. Moments later, she returned from the market with a cup of warm water and a packet of crackers. Owen watched from a distance, struck by the quiet grace of her actions. When the man tried to offer her a few crumpled bills, she simply smiled and shook her head. "Just stay warm," she said, before gathering her groceries and disappearing down the street. Later, Owen saw her again. This time sitting on the stoop of her building, reading a picture book aloud to a little boy whose mother, still in an apron, had rushed out in a panic. Grace handed the child back with a kind smile and returned upstairs. Unnoticed by most. But not by Owen. He sat in his car for a long time afterward. His thoughts tangled. The world so often overlooked women like Grace, quiet, worn down, yet endlessly giving. But Owen saw her clearly. She reminded him so much of his mother, soft-spoken, incredibly strong, and kind without any need for fanfare. She didn't just resemble her in spirit. She had the same compassionate heart. And Owen realized then that it wasn't just admiration he was feeling. He was drawn to her. A few days later, he saw her at a gas station. He was filling his tank when her old car coughed to a stop beside him. She looked tired. "Cold morning." "Huh?" he said, his voice casual. She looked up, cautious. "Colder than I expected." "You live nearby?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not far. I'm Owen," he said, offering his hand. "Grace," she replied, shaking it lightly. They shared a few light words. And Grace even laughed once when Owen joked about gas pumps freezing at the worst possible times. It was the first time he saw her smile fully. And it stunned him. Not long after, he ran into her again at the grocery store. This time with Ellie in tow. "You're the man from Christmas Eve," Ellie exclaimed brightly. "Mr. Christmas." Owen chuckled. "That's me." Ellie took to him instantly, chatting away about her stuffed bear, her drawings, and how her mommy made the best pancakes when they had flour. Owen offered to carry their bags to the car. Grace hesitated, then nodded with a grateful smile. Days later, Grace collapsed at work. She had pushed herself too hard 3 shifts in a row, with barely anything to eat. The clinic admitted her for exhaustion and dehydration, but her insurance was insufficient. The bill grew by the hour. When she woke, a nurse handed her a paper. "Your bill has been taken care of," the nurse said gently. "An anonymous donor. There's a note for you." With trembling fingers, Grace opened the envelope. Inside, a simple message was written on a small card, paid in full. "Merry Christmas." She stared at the words, her heart pounding. Who would do this? And why? She held the note close, her voice barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The news came like a slap in the face. Grace was standing behind the counter of the small bookstore where she picked up weekend shifts when her coworker, a young woman with a nose for gossip, gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning her phone screen toward Grace. "Isn't this the guy you were talking to at the gas station and the store?" Grace froze. On the screen was a glossy photo from a business article, Owen Blake, CEO of Blake Holdings, standing in front of a luxury high-rise with his signature half-smile and a sharp suit. The headline read, "Reclusive real estate mogul returns to hometown for the holidays." Her heart sank as the color drained from her face. Everything clicked into place: the roof repairs, the groceries, the paid medical bill, the mysterious flowers, the notes. It had all been him. Grace left work early that day, barely remembering the walk home. Her thoughts were a blur of disbelief and a sharp sting of betrayal. By the time she reached her apartment, Ellie was drawing by the window, humming to herself. "Mommy." She beamed. "Mr. Christmas left a note in my book. He said he liked my drawing of Mr. Buttons." Grace knelt beside her, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. "Ellie, Mr. Christmas's real name is Owen. He's not just a nice man. He's very rich, very important. And he's been helping us." Ellie blinked. "He helped us because we needed help. Right?" Grace hesitated. "Maybe. But I don't know if that's all." That evening, after Ellie was asleep, she walked down the snowy sidewalk to the cafe where she had seen him before. Just as she expected, he was there. Owen stood when he saw her enter. "Grace, why didn't you tell me?" She cut him off, her voice shaking. He exhaled, a sad look in his eyes. "Because I knew how you'd react. You think I'm some charity case?" she accused, her pride wounded. "You watched me struggle. And instead of treating me like a person, you threw money at my problems like I was some rescue mission. That's not what this is." "Really?" she snapped. "Then what is it? You hide who you are, acting like some regular guy at a gas station. And all this time you're Blake Holdings. You're the name on the bill. The food. The flowers. You lied to me. I never lied. Grace. Owen said softly. I just didn't lead with my net worth. I don't need your pity. She said bitterly. I don't need a rich man feeling sorry for the poor widow and her kid. I'm not helping you because I feel sorry for you. He said. Finally stepping closer. I'm helping because you deserve better. You deserve peace. You deserve to rest. You deserve joy. I've seen you. Grace. I've seen how you help people without expecting anything back. I've seen how you love your daughter with everything you have. That's not pity. That's respect. Her eyes filled with tears. But she blinked them back furiously. It's not your place to decide what I need. No. It's not. He agreed gently. But I care. And I want to be there for you. If you'll let me. She turned to leave. But a small voice cut through the cold evening air. Are you mad at Mommy? They both turned. Ellie stood a few feet away. Her jacket barely zipped. Her teddy bear clutched in one hand. Owen's throat tightened as he crouched to her level. No. Sweetheart. I'm not mad at Mommy. Because Mommy's scared. Ellie said softly. With a child's simple wisdom. When people help us. She gets scared they'll go away. Owen looked up at Grace. Who couldn't speak? Who could barely breathe? He turned back to Ellie. Brushing a snowflake from her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. Then he stood. Met Grace's eyes. And said nothing more. The words hung in the air between them. Grace nodded slowly. Wrapped her arms around Ellie. And walked away without another word. But as she held her daughter close. She felt something inside her shift. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But maybe. Just maybe. It was the beginning of it. The first snowfall of the new year blanketed the small town in quiet white. Owen stood at Grace's door with a carefully wrapped box in hand. Uncertain if she would even open it. She did. Grace appeared in the doorway. Her expression cautious. But the hard wall of anger was gone. Hi. She said. Hi. Owen replied. Holding out the box. Just a small New Year's gift for Ellie. She's coloring in the kitchen. Grace said. Taking the package. She hesitated. Then nodded and stepped aside. You can come in. Ellie squealed the moment she saw him. Mr. Christmas. Still my name. Huh. Owen laughed. It always will be. She said proudly. Grace sat nearby as Ellie unwrapped the gift, a soft lavender scarf with tiny, embroidered silver stars. Her eyes lit up. It's so pretty. She gasped. Thank you. Daddy. The room fell silent. Owen froze. Grace stiffened. Ellie. Completely unaware. Twirled with the scarf. Look. Mommy. He got it just right. Owen knelt beside her. Do you like it? I love it. She said. Grinning. He rose slowly. Meeting Grace's wide, stunned eyes. I didn't tell her to call me that. He said softly. I never suggested it. Grace nodded. But said nothing. I'm not trying to replace anyone, he added, his voice sincere. I just want to be here. If you'll let me. For her. For you. After Ellie went to her room to play, they sat at the small kitchen table. Grace cradled a mug of tea, her eyes fixed on the cup. You caught me off guard, she said finally. That word. It shook me. Me too, Owen admitted. I've tried so hard to keep things steady for her, Grace confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Ellie's only ever had me. Letting someone else in. It feels like risking everything. He waited, letting her speak. My husband, she began. He was a kind man. Not perfect, but good. When he died, I lost more than love. I lost my trust in the world. In the idea that anyone else could ever care that much again. I understand, Owen said. And his voice was full of empathy. My mom passed not long ago. She was gentle. Thoughtful. She believed kindness didn't need to be loud to be powerful. That's what drew me to you. The way you helped that man at the market. The way you read to that little boy. You reminded me of her. She used to say, little miracles come from people who love without being asked. I didn't fully believe her until I saw you. Tears welled in Grace's eyes, and this time, she let them fall. I've been so angry, she whispered. At the world. At myself. For not being enough. For not giving Ellie more. You've given her everything that matters, Owen said firmly. Love. Safety. Joy. You're the strongest person I know. Grace. She looked at him. A faint smile touching her lips. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said. But I meant what I said before. I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the old heater and the muffled sound of Ellie humming in her room. I don't know how to let someone in again, Grace admitted, her voice raw with vulnerability. Then let's learn together, Owen replied. She let out a shaky breath. And something tight inside her chest finally eased. I'm scared. So am I, he said. But maybe scared is just the beginning of something really good. Grace gave a slow, deliberate nod. That night, as Owen stood to leave, Ellie ran to him and gave him a fierce hug. Bye, Daddy, she said brightly. Then paused. Is it okay I call you that? Owen knelt and hugged her close, his heart swelling. It's more than okay. Grace stood in the doorway, her arms crossed lightly over her chest, caught in the space between fear and hope. She did not stop Ellie. And she did not stop Owen when he turned and said, I'll see you soon. This time, she believed he would. In the weeks that followed, their world began to fill with laughter. They built a lopsided snowman with a twig smile and Ellie's mitten for a hat. They went to the local ice rink, where Owen patiently held Ellie's hands as she wobbled across the ice. Grace, who hadn't skated in years, hesitated at the edge. Then we'll go slow, Owen had said, offering his hand. And they did. Skating and stumbling and laughing together as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. One evening, after Grace had carried a sleepy Ellie to bed, Owen stayed behind in the quiet living room. He picked up Mr. Buttons, Ellie's beloved and very worn-out teddy bear. The seams were frayed and one eye was barely holding on. He could have easily bought her a dozen new toys. But he knew this bear wasn't just a toy. It was a memory. A furry little soldier who had stood guard through lonely nights. That night, Owen found a needle and thread. With patient, careful hands, he restitched the neck, secured the loose eye, and reinforced the arms. He tied a tiny lavender ribbon around Mr. Button's neck, a perfect match to Ellie's favorite scarf, and placed the mended bear beside her on her pillow. The next morning, Ellie shrieked with joy. "Mr. Buttons is all better," she cried, running into the kitchen. "Look, Mommy. He has a bow now." Grace looked from the bear to Owen. A look of surprised gratitude in her eyes. "He does," she said softly. Owen, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, just smiled. Maybe he just needed a little rest. But that night, Ellie's happy energy gave way to a sudden fever. She cried out in her sleep, her cheeks flushed and her skin hot to the touch. Grace rushed to her side, Owen close behind. They worked together through the night, trading shifts with cool cloths and whispered words of comfort. Around midnight, Ellie stirred and whimpered. "Daddy." Owen leaned close, brushing her damp hair from her forehead. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the dark room. "Daddy's here." She didn't speak again, just clutched Mr. Buttons tighter and drifted back to sleep. Grace stood in the doorway, her hand to her chest. She had heard every word. Later, as Owen stepped out for more towels, she stopped him. "She called for you," she said, her voice quiet. He nodded. "I know. And you stayed." "I would stay every night," he said, his gaze unwavering. "If you'd let me." Grace looked at him, her expression softer and more open than he had ever seen it. For the first time, she let herself truly see him, not the CEO, not the anonymous benefactor, but the man who fixed broken toys and stayed through fevers. He hadn't just come for Ellie. He had come for both of them. And finally, she was no longer afraid of what that meant. The church was quiet that morning, dressed in soft winter light. It was nearly empty, just the way Owen had planned it. "You said we were going to the park," Grace whispered to Owen as they stood at the entrance, her eyes narrowing with suspicion but softened by a hint of a smile. "We'll go after," he replied, offering her his hand. "Come inside." "Come on, Mommy. It's a surprise." Ellie tugged at her mother's arm excitedly. Grace sighed, amused and curious, and stepped with them into the sanctuary. As they walked toward the front, she noticed a single bouquet of white lilies resting on the pew where she and Ellie had sat that fateful Christmas Eve. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned and saw Owen standing beneath the soft glow of the altar candles, his expression full of love. Owen took a step forward and reached for Ellie first. He knelt on one knee, looking up at her with warmth in his eyes. "Ellie," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "From the very first day I heard your prayer in this church, something changed in me. You didn't ask for toys or magic. You asked for someone to love your mommy. And I knew, right then, that I wanted to be that person." Ellie blinked. Her lips parted in wonder. "May I be your dad?" he asked softly. "Not just for today, but for every day. For pancakes and snowmen and bedtime stories and all the hugs you'll ever need." Ellie squealed, jumping into his arms. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 yes." Grace covered her mouth, tears already welling. Owen then turned toward her. Still on one knee, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. But he didn't open it right away. "Grace," he said gently. "That night, I came to this church trying to remember what peace felt like. I had just lost my mother. And I was broken. I didn't come here looking for anything." He paused, swallowing hard. "Instead, I found you. I watched you love your daughter so fiercely, carry so much on your own, and still find time to be kind to strangers. You don't need saving, Grace. You never did. But if you'll let me, I want to stand beside you. Not in front of you. I want to build a life with you. Not because of what we've lost, but because of all that we can become together." He opened the box. Inside was a ring not large or showy, but elegant and warm, with a timeless grace. Just like her. "Grace," he whispered, his voice full of hope. "May I be your home?" The church fell into a profound silence. And then Ellie, unable to contain herself, burst out. "Please, Mommy, say yes." Grace laughed through her tears, her body shaking from the swell of emotion she could no longer hold back. She knelt beside them, cupped Owen's face in her hands, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You already are." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger and wrapped his arms around them both as the church bells suddenly rang out above them. Their clear, joyful peals echoing across the snow-covered streets. Outside, the town remained quiet, unaware of the miracle taking place inside. But for Grace, Ellie, and Owen, this was the answer to a prayer. The beginning of a family. The start of everything. 1 year later, the house smelled of cinnamon and pine. A gentle fire crackled in the living room fireplace, and soft Christmas music played from the kitchen, where Grace stood frosting cupcakes, humming along with the melody. In the den, Owen was helping Ellie wrap presents with far too much tape and an endless supply of glitter. The snow outside lay thick and peaceful, a pristine blanket over their new life. Everything had changed since last Christmas. And yet, everything felt exactly as it should have always been. They had moved into a quiet home just a few blocks from the old church. It had a big backyard for Ellie to run in, a cozy reading nook filled with pillows and books, and a front porch where they drank hot cocoa on chilly mornings. But more than anything, it had warmth, laughter, and an abundance of love. Owen, true to his word, had become more than Grace ever imagined. A partner, a friend, and a devoted father who chose love not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Together, they had founded a charitable organization called the Christmas Angel Project. Inspired by Ellie's whispered prayer, the nonprofit offered financial support, mentorship, and housing assistance to single mothers across the state. It became Owen's new legacy. One built not on skyscrapers, but on second chances. As the day wore on, Grace bundled Ellie into her coat and boots. "We have one quick stop to make," she said with a knowing smile. "Where are we going?" Ellie asked, clutching a small, lopsidedly wrapped gift in her mittened hands. "You'll see." They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, the snow crunching beneath their boots, until the familiar steeple of the old church came into view. The sanctuary was empty, save for a few lit candles flickering near the altar. Grace led Ellie to the front pew, the very same spot where she had once knelt. So small and uncertain, praying for something she could barely name. Ellie looked around, her eyes wide. "I remember this place," she whispered. "I thought you might," Grace said gently. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ellie leaned forward, folded her hands just as she had before, and whispered toward the empty altar. Her voice filled not with longing, but with pure, unadulterated wonder. "God, it's me. Ellie. Thank you. I got my daddy for Christmas." Grace's eyes welled with tears as Owen stepped quietly into the sanctuary behind them. He said nothing, just placed a warm hand on Grace's shoulder and leaned down to kiss the top of Ellie's head. Outside, the world was cold and quiet. But inside that little church, the warmth of a family born not of perfection, but of a prayer and a promise, glowed brighter than any candle. And somewhere deep in Grace's heart, she knew that miracles were real, especially the quiet kind, the ones whispered on a snowy Christmas night. Thank you for watching this heartwarming tale of love, healing, and unexpected miracles. Sometimes, the quietest prayers are heard by the people who need to hear them most. And sometimes, family isn't just found, but built with grace. One act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories, where we bring you true-to-life stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all of the profound beauty in everyday moments. Until next time, stay kind and keep believing in small miracles.